You able to see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So at the end of the slot, if I went over a little bit, I don't have much time myself, but is there another session right after this or?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'll get started. So this presentation, Seb wanted me to put together. I think it's the first time. It's the first time that we're doing it. I actually built a slide deck this morning, so it's pretty fresh. But it's on what to build on ICP. And our goal is to make Web3 useful, because if we're building stuff that's not useful, then what's the point, right? And this is particularly exciting to me because I feel like the entire Web3 industry is still looking for its use cases, its reward use cases. And I think ICP gives us all the best chance of being able to help finally realize those use cases. For the agenda today, I'm going to do a quick presentation about 30 minutes long. Maybe I can even get it a little bit shorter since we started a little bit late. I'll share a bit about me, pitfalls to avoid, recommendations, an example of a great idea to build, and some inspiration. Then you'll get 20 minutes of team brainstorming, and the last few minutes, you can share some ideas that you come up with. So this would be a fun one, kind of more interactive. Let's get started. So my name's Isaac. I've been involved with the Internet Computer since Genesis. I saw the Genesis launch come up in my YouTube notifications and have been enthralled and engaged ever since. I worked with Seb on a project called D Squad, an NFT project called D Squad. That was really fun for almost a year. And then we together we created the very first Motoko Bootcamp. I also created the NNS proposal submission DApp, which lets people submit proposals to the NNS without using the command line. I created a proof of physical ownership protocol called Integral, where you can embody physical, you can embody digital assets into physical objects. Like this is from our conference, it's a badge, and the proof of attendance NFT. Its transfer function can only be accessed if you tap this to the back of your phone and tell it what wallet to go into. And I joined Code State January of this year. I won't go into my previous background, but I funded some startups. I founded some startups before, mechanical engineering degree, things like that. My current job at Code State is venture lead. So it's pretty much the best job in the world. I get to make companies for a living, and I hear a lot of pitches and consult with a lot of startups, help them refine their ideas, find success, that kind of thing. So when it comes to brainstorming Web3 ideas, I mean, I think most of you are trying to learn how to build on Web3 because you want to make some stuff, right? So some common pitfalls to avoid when you're looking for things to build. Copying an existing business model, prioritizing Web3 idealism over performance. And I think we all know what this looks like. It's like Google except decentralized, or it's like, whatever, fill in the blank except decentralized. In the end, the market prefers pragmatism and convenience over broad aspirations, right? So like you need to take things further than just copying something in a slightly more decentralized way and having decentralization be your selling point, because I think we've all seen it's been proven it's not the strongest selling point especially for most audiences outside of Web3. Most people I find they think too big too soon, and you need to think big, but I think the trick here is everything looks perfect in its final idealized state. Like if you already have a bunch of users and you're already down the road and you already have all the connections you need in the industry, any idea you come up with in that scenario would look great, right? The challenge is, how do you go from being a solo builder all the way up to something that's going to have a really strong impact? And so an example I share, I can show, for example, like how they have this big aspiration, but they broke it down into like this intermediary step in a really smart and brilliant way. You want to avoid things that could just be done better without Web3. I think we've all seen projects where we realize, well, that's actually pretty cool, but you can do that without Web3. Like, well, what do you really need Web3 for? Sometimes just adding Web3 as a unnecessary tack on to an idea doesn't really make it better. And the last pitfall Especially susceptible are people who love the tech and they just want to build tech. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, this talk is really in the context of what to build if you're wanting to make Web3 useful. So if you just want to build for the sake of your own interest, that's totally fine. And in fact, I think that's an important step in your learning journey. You should build side projects. You should build things that you don't even intend to turn into any kind of business or any type of big thing. It's fine. But if you do want to sit down and really focus on building the next big thing for Web3, and you need to be building value, not just tech. And I have a whole talk on entrepreneurship for Web3s devs that's in this link here, and we'll be sharing the slide deck afterwards, so you'll be able to reference that. All right, so recommendations. Start with insight. This is kind of the key thing, I think, here. It applies to really any kind of startup idea, but what do you understand about some particular thing better than anyone else, right? And this usually comes from just your life or just, experience when you're getting good at a skill or you have a strong interest. I have an example. My example shows a little bit of what this means. But it should essentially start with you contributing an insight, because if you're not contributing an insight to the idea of that you're building on, if it's just an idea that anyone could build, there's probably somebody who does have insight that's better than yours who would be better at building it than you. So you want to start with where you have insights. Then you want to develop a strong empathy for your users or your target market, people that you can start using your product. And this requires talking to people, particularly paying attention to what they don't say, because people don't really want to tell you to your face if your idea is stupid, because that's generally considered rude. There's a link to, in my other slide deck, there's a link to a book called The Mom Test, where it's a really short little book. It basically just talks about how to share your ideas with people such that even your mom would tell you it's a bad idea if it is. Yeah, so you really need to understand who your users are to be able to create value for them. I know that's obvious, but it requires taking action. And then you match that insights and empathy to a strength of Web3. So be sure it's something that Web3 and ICP is actually good at, not just something that you wish it was good at. And really, like, whatever is created that brings Web3 mass adoption is going to probably follow this line of sight. Somebody will come in with an insight nobody else thought of, understand the market better than them, and then match that to a strength of Web3 to do something that no one else can compete with. I mean, this is really just the recipe that's going to have to happen for mass adoption for Web3. And the last one is kind of most important. I'm surprised by how many projects in Web3 just completely and totally ignore Web2 markets. But that's where the money is. And if we want to grow Web3 and gain mass adoption, we're not going to do it just by patting ourselves on the back within our small little circle of technology nerds. We need to, bring real world value to people who don't even know that they're using Web3. And I think the reason I love ICP is because it really makes this more feasible to do, more possible. You can have dApps that you log into with your Google account, right? Things that look and feel like the normal web, but they actually have immutable functions and Web3 qualities behind the scenes. So yeah, don't avoid Web2 markets. In fact, that's probably where you need to bring the insight that you have from. All right, so an example, I thought it's always good to have some tangible example kind of showing off these principles. One project I came across recently is Loca Mining. They're using ICP to create a platform where Bitcoin miners can sell their future hash rates with collateralized contracts. So this gives the miners a way to fund their Bitcoin mining operation without selling BTC or risking liquidation with the lending protocol. So basically, like, their hash rate, they can monetize, they can liquidate it more effectively. But it also gives the investors a way to buy future Bitcoin below market price, kind of like in a dollar cost average type of way. And then their long-term goal is actually to build the very first fully decentralized Bitcoin mining pool, something which is only buildable with ICP tech. Now, what I love about this idea is it does start with insight. The founder himself owns a Bitcoin mining company, and he was looking at the current alternatives for how to expand his operations, and he saw problems with all of them. So he, based on his knowledge and insight within the industry, thought of a new way to, what if I could sell my future hash rate? What if I could sell that hash rate and use the money I raised then to buy the equipment I need to deliver on that hash rate? And since I have Bitcoin, I could collateralize this with my Bitcoin. And at a smaller ratio than a lending protocol. So he started with that, and it really shows that like the whole idea, like I would never have thought of this idea, but somebody who's involved in the industry would, right? And that's kind of the point. It also can only be built if there's a way to have a Bitcoin wallet that no human is able to control, a Bitcoin wallet that's fully controlled by decentralized smart contracts. So this is something that can only be built on ICP. The Bitcoin market is really huge and growing, and they already have like 30 Bitcoin miners lined up, and they've only been alive. This project has been alive for maybe 2.5 months, 3 months tops. They've been accepted into Accelerator. They've already had a few VCs interested in investing in them, and they've got like 30 Bitcoin mining companies lined up to be customers, and they have a bunch of retail investors lined up. So it's a great, thriving market for them to get into. I think they came off in the Build for Bitcoin hackathon at Affinity hosted recently. And their first idea and their ultimate goal was to create the centralized mining pool, the very first Bitcoin decentralized mining pool, which is to think that a decentralized protocol like Bitcoin, it runs on mining pools, which are all centralized. So it's kind of like ridiculous that that's the case. It makes a lot of sense. That's why you would want a decentralized mining pool. But you need a huge amount of hash rate to make that a feasible thing to pursue. So instead of starting there, they started with something that serves them an immediate need, which could be built quickly during a hackathon, which was their platform for selling future hash rate. It also is really innovative because it uses ICP to create an entirely new type of Bitcoin primitive, which is future Bitcoin hash rate. So you can see how this idea, this project, it's something that can be built quickly, that solves a real need, that involves insight, that involves deep empathy of knowing your target market. It kind of pits all the best ingredients into play, so to speak. And it avoids the big pitfalls. There's no way that this could be built without Web3. There's no way that a Web2 option could even compare or be competitive with this type of thing. So lots of really interesting info about it. So inspiration, I'm going to leave this slide open when we start the brainstorming. And wow, I went through that pretty quick. So we're going to have plenty of time for brainstorm. So I just threw some things in here. I won't really read them all out, but I put some starter questions in there, just things to get the juices flowing and get you thinking. And here I've listed some of the Web3 capabilities that ICP makes accessible to Web2. And I'll go through these really briefly, but we've got key and credential custodianship. So to my knowledge, ICP is the first and only network that's able to create and use secret keys, which no human ever gets access to. And that's pretty huge. And the second thing is decentralized automations. So Ethereum, the EVM, the smart contracts on that platform cannot initiate transactions. They can only relay transactions. And there's no sense of asynchronous type activity. However, since ICP smart contracts can be automated users on Ethereum, we can now add automations to Ethereum, decentralized automations, and you can have initiative taken by a protocol, and you can even build asynchronicity into the EVM with that. There's all kinds of possibilities that opens up. Permissionless interoperability. What if businesses could interact with each other without having to form legal agreements and partnerships like the normal slow processes? Zero knowledge, an idea based on this recently of just even think about unions. If unions could verifiably be known as employees of a certain company and make their desires known, but the company would not have the ability to know who's involved with the union in any way. So zero knowledge could have big implications in the real world. Community-owned and controlled assets. This is like DAOs, open internet services, things like that. Tokenization and fractionalization. A lot of people are doing like turning art into fractionalized assets, but I think it can go further than just that. And then verifiably fair functions or verifiably unaltered data. And I know some projects are working on this, like verifiably unaltered data is something really interesting that Origin's working on. So yeah, there's lots of possibilities here, but I think we're at the 24-minute mark. So we give it 20 minutes, and then at the 45-minute mark, Seb, we come back and maybe bring up people and share their ideas, whatever they want to come up with.